This podcast is the autobiography that was written by my grandfather, Eric Langridge. And in this introductory episode, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts about the podcast itself to give you some idea of what to expect, but also to share a couple of memories of my grandfather. And probably at the end of the podcast, whole series, I'll throw in some extra thoughts because his book doesn't go all the way to the end of his life, and there will be some gaps that maybe I'll fill in. But my grandfather's autobiography opens up when he was born in London in 1925. And it was a very different London. It's a very different world, but a very different London to the one we know today. His early years read something more like a fiction written by Charles Dickens or one of those old authors. But every word of it is true. I remember bits and pieces of it that my grandfather told me about. But even as I've been reading this book, I've been learning more and more about him, and some of it is wonderful. The historical details, I think many will enjoy. If you enjoy history, then I think you'll get something from his very descriptive paragraphs about his living conditions and meal times and activities that he had as a child. But even if you're not interested necessarily in the details of history that he shares, I think his life is a great story. And maybe that's just because I have the perspective of a grandson. But I think it is amazing to see how his life began, where his life went to in his early childhood years, and where his life ended up. I believe as a Christian that it was by the grace of God. And I know that he was a man of faith, especially in his later years. And so that's something that I may share more about at the end of the series. The book itself, he wrote, it was his autobiography. And I remember him writing it. And then a friend of his that may get mentioned in the book later on, I'm not sure. But it was a family that we came to know through the US Air Force Base that was at Greenham Common in England, near Newbury in Berkshire. And the lady, Terry Butler, was a wonderful lady, very gifted. She was into a great many things and was good at them all, it seemed like, whether it was music or crafts. And in later years, after she left England and her family, her husband Buck and herself moved back here to America, where I now live, she got into building the ships in a bottle and became so expert at it that she was consulted when they were making the movie Master and Commander. But she got a hold of his autobiography. I believe it was her that typed it up and then had it bound into several volumes. My brother has a copy, and one of the copies she kept, and so it made its way here to America. And then about a year ago, Buck Butler, after the passing of his wife, felt that the book needed to be with a member of the family, and so he very, very kindly sent it to me. And so I'm just going to read through it. I'm not going to make any comments. In the early couple of episodes, you'll notice that I stumble over words and make mistakes. Having grown up in the south of England around several Americans, a number of Americans, and then spent time in Northern Ireland, and now living here in the United States, my accent may not always seem entirely English, but that is my heritage, and so some of the words may sound a little bit out of place. But hopefully, none of it will be a distraction from the story of my grandfather's life, and hopefully, his life will be something that you enjoy learning about as we go through it. And so I just wanted to share those opening introductory thoughts. And if you enjoy this, then let me know. And I am looking forward to learning more about my grandfather and his family, things that maybe I'd heard about, other things that I never knew. And already, as I've recorded the first four episodes, I'm being amazed by things that happened in his life. So join with me in this journey.